Welcome to the WRAL Daily Download. I'm Grace Holland. Election season is heating up with less than 3 months to go before Election Day, and I'm not talking just about the race for the White House. Here in North Carolina, tensions are rising in the race to lead our state's schools. The Democratic candidate, Mo Green, is saying his opponent, Republican Michelle Morrow, is not fit for office because of comments she made on January 6th. She called on then-President Donald Trump to use the military to stay in power. WRAL education insider Emily Walkenhorst and Capitol Bureau Chief Laura Leslie talked to both of those candidates on Tuesday. Emily joins me in the studio to talk about that conversation. Thanks for being here.
Glad to be here.
So who are each of these candidates for folks that maybe are seeing these headlines now but didn't know that much about their backgrounds?
Right. So we have Michelle Morrow. Michelle Morrow is a homeschool parent. She's a former nurse. So her kids have not attended public school in North Carolina. They did in some other states that she lived in previously. They've been homeschooled in North Carolina. She ran for Wake County School Board back in 2022 for the Cary district. She did not win. So that's kind of what we know about her, and then she's been more well-known lately for some of the social media posts that she made before she became more politically involved. Then we have Mo Green. He's an attorney by trade, but he's also been superintendent of Guilford County Schools and held various administrative positions in Guilford County and in Charlotte-Mecklenburg schools. He also was recently the executive director of the Z. Smith Reynolds Foundation in Winston-Salem and retired from that a couple years ago, I believe.
Okay. Do we know how these comments came to light this week?
Right. So basically, people, it's election season, people are kind of scrubbing social media accounts, well, what have these people posted before? Basically, CNN on Friday night found a video or were sent a video of Michelle Morrow on January 6, 2021. Of course, we know that is the day that there was a rally at the U.S. Capitol to overturn the results of the election. It turned violent. Some people did die. The Capitol was invaded. Morrow has said she, did not take part in any of that, but she was at the rally. Basically, this video shows her talking all about her thoughts on that and how Trump can stay in power. And CNN posted about this video.
You will have to enact the Insurrection Act, in which case the Insurrection Act completely puts the Constitution to the side and says, now the military rules all. Okay? And let me tell you, President Trump has the military on his side.
And there's just kind of been a fallout since then.
Right. And I know people have talked about her going to January 6th. She brought her kids, I believe, too, right?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Okay. So knowing that background, what has this race looked like up until this point? I mean, it's two very different candidates on each side. You've got Mo Green, who has a lot of experience in North Carolina public schools, and Michelle Morrow, who's really an outsider and was really running on the fact that she's an outsider. So what are the big education issues that they're focusing on? And again, how has the race looked?
Right, so they are two extremely different candidates. The only thing they have in common is neither of them have been teachers in the public school system before. Both by trade have worked other professions, but Green has spent considerably more time in the public schools through administrative roles. The conversations that we've been hearing a lot about, unfortunately, have had a lot to do with social media posts, but people really care a lot about, fitness for office. They have emotional reactions to, hearing some of the things that, people have been talking about on social media. We haven't gotten too much of a chance to really dive into the issues. The Morrow campaign has really wanted to dive more into some education issues, especially, with some of the negative attention they've been getting. So back in April, the Morrow campaign had a big event on school discipline and safety, and the Green campaign has also talked about that as well. Both campaigns are actually very interested in safety and discipline in schools, but just kind of have maybe some different philosophies, some different approaches of, they agree there's a problem, but they don't necessarily agree on the same solution to that problem. So those are things that have come up. Academics, we're still dealing with the fallout of the pandemic learning loss. And, schools need to keep up this momentum to kind of get kids back on track and then excel even farther than that, because we know that that's something that people have wanted. So, I think I think we've talked a lot about social media. I think it's a really, big deal to a lot of people, what these candidates have said on social media before. But there are also a lot of other issues on the table that are really pressing as well.
All right, let's take a quick break right there. When we come back, we'll talk about the interviews that y'all did this week. Emily, before the break, we talked about how this race has looked up until this point. We also talked about these original comments from January 6th that are now coming up for the Morrow campaign. When you guys sat down with her on Tuesday, how did Morrow address those comments?
So she, of course, she didn't take them back, really.
Well, I can tell you that I'm actually really encouraged. I'm encouraged that the left-wing media is actually talking about the importance of the Constitution, because I've actually been fighting for the last 5 or 6 years to ensure that every citizen in North Carolina has their constitutional rights. So I'm actually encouraged.
But she also said that she didn't call for the arrest of people. But that's actually something she said in the video, is she said, we can arrest people for treason.
I thought that it was time for us as we the people to stand up and say, you guys work for us, because I believe everybody that's an elected official works for the people of the United States of America. And government doesn't give us our freedoms. It's actually God-given inalienable rights.
Right, but that wouldn't be the Insurrection Act, right? I mean, the Insurrection Act, you were talking about arresting traitors, people for treason, and you said if the police won't do it, and if the military won't do it.
Those actually were not my words.
I have it. I can play it.
Yeah, my words were not to arrest people for treason.
Okay.
I was stating that when our government is not protecting the God-given inalienable rights of our citizens, that it is our duty to make sure that they understand that they work for us.
And if that involves putting that aside the Constitution, then that's okay?
Well, I say that if you look at what the Insurrection Act does, I mean, you guys are the ones that said it was an insurrection, so why aren't you asking for the Insurrection Act to be enacted?
And she really used this as an opportunity to talk about her, what she believes is a left-wing bias against her, believing it's left-wing media who are against her, especially CNN. She has really talked a lot about, she thinks CNN has ulterior motives. And so she was very defensive of her video back in 2021. And, it just hasn't really taken any of that back. She kept saying she wanted to talk about school. She wanted to talk about education. But at the same time, she wasn't interested in taking back anything she said in the video.
And what other questions did you guys have for her? Were you able to get into any policy stuff?
We did have a chance to speak briefly about some other issues that just deserve a more in-depth look. I mentioned earlier, pandemic learning loss. That's definitely something to dive into.
They're concerned that our students don't know how to read and write, and yet my opponent is bragging about graduation rates, and we know that they're inflated. And so it's time for us to get back to a sound basic education in North Carolina, and that's what I intend to do.
Student discipline, school safety, things like that. But we did spend a lot of time also talking about statements that candidates have publicly made. So Michelle Morrow has talked. She said that public schools are liberal indoctrination centers, and she's urged people not to send their kids to them. And that's an important issue as well. So we did ask both candidates about those comments. And Morrow continues to believe that schools are too liberal. And, Mo Green doesn't really agree with that. He thinks that they don't really force anybody to be liberal. And, that they are most often pretty neutral.
Right. And I know that with CNN getting that video of those comments, Mo Green also talked to CNN as he did to us. So what is his take on her comments and the situation?
So he says that they all just illustrate, that Michelle Morrow is unfit to serve public office.
And to think that we could have someone who, said what she said on that video in charge of our safety and security of our 1.3 million public school students was deeply disturbing to me. I also certainly think about the fact that whoever is elected is going to have to swear to an oath to uphold the Constitution. And it caused me to question whether, she could actually be trusted to uphold the Constitution when she says in the video to put it aside and essentially put in a military coup.
The superintendent is in charge of, overseeing, billions of dollars and 1.5 million public school children. So he's saying this is, what she's saying is, she's just too dangerous to be in charge of all of this.
Right. And did he have any other policy points that he felt were important to make?
Yeah, so he's very big on character education. So, and that was something he had done in Guilford County was, putting a point of emphasis for students on what is good character.
Well, we made character equally as important as academic outcomes, to the point that character, the district was recognized as a national district of character. We helped our students understand how to comport themselves, how to be in relationship with each other, even when they're in disagreement with each other, and also how to be of service to their community.
So that's something he really wants to continue as superintendent. And with both candidates, we talked about, discipline, safety, and there's a lot more coverage that we plan to do down the road.
Yeah. Where do you think that this leaves the race at this point?
It's really, it's hard to tell because, this isn't the first time that Michelle Morrow has gotten attention nationally for comments that she's made on social media. Most of the comments that people seem to be pulling out are things that she did make years ago, and that's something she always points out. These comments were years ago, but she has deleted the account on X that she was posting most of these statements to. This video in particular, I don't believe was posted to X, but, other comments about wanting, various public officials to be killed. She said she wanted President Barack Obama put in front of a firing squad on pay-per-view. She's said a lot of these things, never really taken any of them back. And I think, that's going to resonate with a lot of people. But there are also people who might have already known these things about her. Back when she ran for Wake County School Board back in 2022, we published stories. We said, this is who the candidates are. We mentioned a lot of her social media posts wanting to ban Islam and all kinds of things. She did apologize for saying she wanted to ban Islam back then, but not necessarily for some of the other things. And so she lost that race in Wake County, but again, that's just voters in Cary. I don't know how representative that is of North Carolina, so we'll just have to see how voters respond.
That's right. And we'll see you on November 5th. Thank you, Emily, and thank you for listening to the WRAL Daily Download. Another great way to get WRAL news is the Morning Briefing newsletter. It's a daily email that's waiting in your inbox every morning with local news, events, and headlines to get you ready for the day. Sign up at WRAL.com/newsletter.